was talking, but at my age, you have to get a head start. I didn't want you to go to sleep. Aren't we grateful for our Baptist friends coming in? One of them said to me, he said, "Preacher, the way you Methodists eat, you must believe in salvation by grease." And I think the Baptists do a good bit of that eating too. I've borrowed Baptist baptistries to immerse people. You know, in the Methodist Church, we baptize by immersion, by sprinkling, or by pouring, which was one of the early ways the Christians did it. So, and would you believe some Baptists have borrowed our baptistry? When I served in Johnson City, the church was sort of like the YMCA. We had a full-size Olympic swimming pool. And you wouldn't believe the number of Baptists that borrowed the Methodist baptistry. So they do immersions. You know, every now and then a Baptist backslides and becomes a Methodist. And they make wonderful Methodists because somehow the Baptists teach them better. And they tend to carry their Bibles. And they tend to tithe. So I'm always delighted when somebody backslides and becomes a Methodist. Thank you all again for being here. Thank you for your wonderful spirit. I have a hunch that we're all going to be amazed when we get to heaven to discover that there are people there we never thought would make it. I'm living now in a retirement center, and when I'm in town, I do the worship services on Sunday afternoon. And it's wonderful with the Methodists, the Baptists that provide our song leader and our pianist. We've got Presbyterians, we've got Catholics. And you know, I can't tell which is which. They all love Jesus. Amen. And that's good enough for me. Have you noticed that they sing the same hymns we sing? And they seem to know victory in Jesus. When I visit around, I always go a little early, and I get out to hymnal. And I'm amazed whether it's a Presbyterian church, an Episcopal church, a Methodist church, Baptist church, whatever, the hymns are the same. What does that tell us? God inspires people of all faiths. And God inspires preachers of all faith. And God inspires you. Thank you for being here tonight. You know, these two have been spoiling me. But I want you to know that this today, Bud imposed on my goodness. He made me watch a video of my sermon last night. And I don't know whether you've ever listened to yourself on tape or looked at yourself on tape. It's not a pleasant experience, you know. I really thought I was better than that. I know I'm kidding. But I did notice something, and I won't even tell you about it because you'll be watching for it. But thank you, Bud. I developed a habit or two that I need to get rid of. But I'm not going to worry about that so much tonight. I want to preach the gospel. I'm not worried about where my hand is or what I'm doing in a moment. Last night we tried to remember who God is. God is like a shepherd. As Jesus said, "I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep by name. I go before them. I lay down my life for the sheep." Jesus said God is like a woman turning a house upside down, trying to find a lost coin. God's searching for you and for me. And God's like a father who doesn't care what the son has done, but forgives and restores the son as if he'd never left. do you respond to the Good Shepherd? I'd like for you to look at Mark, the 12th chapter. This is a very interesting chapter. The religious leaders are trying to trap Jesus. They're threatened by his teaching. They're trying to find a way to get rid of him. And they've got some pretty interesting questions. They said to Jesus, what do we do about paying taxes? Well, that seemed like a simple enough question, but if he said pay the taxes, the people won't like him because the taxes are assessed by Rome. And they're under the heel of Rome, and they despise taxes. But if he says don't pay them, then the Romans will be down his throat. So Jesus said, give me a coin. Whose image is on it? And they said, but Caesar. He said, pay to Caesar's what's Caesar's, and to God what's God's. Well, they couldn't argue with that. Then they said, you know, a man married his wife, and he died. And then, as the law expected, his brother married the widow. Didn't have any children, and he died. She married the third brother, he died. The fourth brother, he died. I believe by this time I would have gotten out of that line of succession. And finally, the seventh one died. And the question is, whose husband? And Jesus said, you really don't understand what heaven's like, do you? Right. Heaven will be so much better than anything you can imagine about marriage that that'll be a moot question. I don't understand that answer. But it does let me know that we don't have to solve all the problems. We just trust God that heaven's going to be better than anything we can imagine. By far. Well, there's a young man listening to this, and he was impressed with the way Jesus answered. And then he said, Lord, what is the great commandment? And that's a good question. You know, what's really important? What's basic? And that's always been a problem. You know, we get to defining what religion is. The more we lose members, the thicker our discipline gets. We're always trying to put people into a mold and answer every question. They did that back then. Keep the Sabbath holy. Well, what does that mean? Well, you don't work on the Sabbath. Well, what is work? Well, if you're going to treat somebody who's sick, you can treat them enough to make them not get worse, but you can't treat them enough to make them get better. I mean, how do you sort that out? You can't look in a mirror on the Sabbath because not only women, but men can't look in a mirror without doing their hair. And that's work. So pretty soon all this stuff piles up, so you just want to throw up your hand. You say, what's really important? Micah says, do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with God. I had a friend in Johnson City, he was a CPA. Archie was a great guy, we all loved him, but he personified no detail as unimportant. And they used to say, don't ask Archie the time of day, he'll tell you how to make a watch. And we all know people like that, don't we? What does it mean to be a Christian? Well, you don't drink, you don't chew, and you don't run around with girls and do. And we just keep defining what it means to be a Christian. So this guy said, Lord, you seem to know what you're talking about. What's the most important? And it's interesting, Jesus often tells us more we want to know. What is the commandment? Jesus said, love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And love your neighbor as yourself. There are three commandments. Love God, love your neighbor, love yourself. I want to love God, don't you? God has loved me. God me, God has allowed me to live in this beautiful world, especially Southwest Virginia and East Tennessee. God's given me the church. God's given me a wonderful family. God's given me friends. God's given me a sense of purpose and calling. And I want to love God. It's interesting, Jesus didn't say understand God. He didn't say explain God. He said love God. Love God. Oh, we like to get diverted. We like to explain. We like to deal with the great issues. If there is a good God, why is there so much evil? Have you ever heard anybody pondering if there is so much bad, why is there a good God? If there is no God, why is there so much good? What inspires us to be better? When I was in college, they knew I was going into medicine. They liked to pick at me. And they said one day, Dick, do you believe in the omnipotence of God? And I said, well, of course. They said, then can God make a rock so big that he can't lift it? Well, now you work on that one when you get home tonight. If God can't make a rock so big he can't lift it, God is limited. If God can make a rock so big he can't lift it, God is limited. So what? God is limited. God will not do an ungodly thing. And we give God credit for the most ungodly deeds sometimes. When I was a young preacher, I used to be intimidated when I went into a home where there had been a tragic death. I didn't know what to say. And I started listening to older preachers and older Christians, and sometimes what they said was terrible. Here's a young man who's been killed by a drunk driver. And somebody says to the parents that the Lord never made a mistake. Well, of course the Lord never made a mistake, but are you implying that God inspired that man to get drunk and kill that boy? Don't give God credit for what the devil does. Amen. And sometimes we do that in the name of being pious. We explain away the most dastardly deeds by saying, well, God's will be done. That's not God's will. We defy God's will. And God is also limited by our freedom. God gave us freedom. God will not make us do what we won't do. So God is limited by God's character and God's gift of freedom. But God can still do what God needs to do. You remember your first time to fly? My family did an exchange in England. And we to save money, we drove to Toronto, Canada, and got on a 747 to England. That thing was loaded with 400 people. We had 10 pieces of luggage. We were going for 6 weeks. I said to myself, that thing will never get off the ground. The law of gravity will pull it right back down. Well, there is a law of gravity, but there's also the law of aerodynamics. Enough thrust and enough lift, and an impossibility happens. Well, if humans can do that, why is it impossible to believe that God can use his own laws to do miracles? God can do the impossible. So, don't explain God. Love God. Don't understand God. Love God. How many of you men understand women? How many of you women understand men? But you love them anyway, huh? And we can love God without understanding God. Forgive this personal story. One Monday morning I was in my office. I was not only the preacher I mean, I was feeling good, and I was almost congratulating God on his good judgment in calling me into the ministry. Most of the time, I wondered about why God called me into the ministry. But in the middle of this ego trip, I suddenly realized what I was doing. Normally, I would have bowed my head and said, God, forgive me, this is awful. This is unbecoming for a Christian. Imagine what it is for a preacher. But for some reason I'll never understand, I didn't bow my head. I reared back in my chair and I spoke out loud and I said, God, you've got a charmer on your hands. And I sensed that God laughed. I can't prove it. Didn't make any sense. But I felt warmth and understanding and forgiveness. And I realized in a way that warmed my heart and my being that God knew all about me. That God understood my stupidity. And yet, God loved me anyway. God could laugh with me. You know, I can love a God that can laugh with me. That can understand and call me to be better. Love God. Well, then Jesus makes it tough. He said, love your neighbor. Well, I've got some neighbors I love easily, but you know, God, you don't really expect me to love so-and-so. Do you lay people understand that everybody in a local church is not lovable? Do you understand that there are some real cranks and people who are always unhappy and always negative, always complaining? And I just soon not be around them. But I am paid as pastor to love my people. And that's a blessing because I learned that some of these people I didn't like. When I really got to know them, when I knew what was stirring in their heart, when I knew the suffering they were enduring, when I knew their family situation, when I knew their business situation, when I really got to know them, I could love them. Didn't have to like them, but I could love them. Because love is not just an emotion. Love is what you do. Jesus said God sends rain on the just and the unjust. He said sunshine on the good and the evil. Wouldn't it be interesting to go around this county and see who loved God and who didn't? Those who didn't, the fields would dry. The cows would die. Wouldn't that be an interesting world to live in? But that's not God. God loves the just and the unjust, the good and the bad. And God calls you to me to do the same. I'd like to tell you about a friend of mine. We got to be such good friends that we called each other cuz. When I first met him, he was a member of my congregation. He had been brainwashed into believing that most Methodist preachers were communists. Some of you all remember back in the 60s, the movements. There was a preacher up in New Jersey that wrote all these articles about the communists had taken over the church and on and on. And he was suspicious of me, and he came every Sunday and took notes on my sermons. I usually like that. But that bothered me because he was judging me. And every time I visited, it was just 1 hour of complaints. The Methodist Church was infiltrated. The church school literature was unchristian and on and on. And I didn't want to see him. But he was a member. And regularly I went to visit. And I listened for an hour to garbage. I got to know him. Turned out that he taught my children in Sunday school, but they loved him. He took them out on his houseboat. And in time, I came to know him and understand some of the disappointment in his life, some of the suspicion that he came to know me. Love can make a friend out of an enemy. Love is not a weak, namby-pamby emotion that we Christians assume. It's the power of God unto salvation. And if you don't have to feel good about the person, you don't have to enjoy their company, but you can speak, you can pray for them, you can do what they need. And as I visited in the home and in the hospital, we became friends. Who changed? We both did. And I thank God that I am required and expected to love my neighbor. And I don't know whether you know it or not, but you are a minister. Every baptized Christian is not only saved, but is called to ministry. Amen. It's not all ordained, but every one of us is called to ministry. And it's not as complicated as you think. Sometimes it's just a smile. I was in a restaurant recently and a fellow was waiting on me and he was terrific. And finally I said to him, I said, you're really good at your job. I said, you must have been doing this a long time. He said, no, I've just been here a week. And then he went on to tell me that he'd been in prison. He used to work in a restaurant. And he said, I'm out now and I'm trying to lead a new life. And I had the opportunity not to convert him, but I had the opportunity to encourage him. And it's amazing how I feel just showing interest in somebody. I'm living down in a retirement center and it's just full of old people. You know, I'm one of the younger people there. And you look at there, just all these old people. You ought to listen to these old people. I mean, they are fascinating people. They've worked in the Pentagon. They're from all over the place. They've had incredible jobs. And they just need somebody to listen. Somebody to show some encouragement. And you can do that when you shop at the grocery store. Smile at the person who's been beat up all day. Thank them for their service. Say simply, I hope you're having a good day. Carry somebody else's burden. And you'll find joy. Because that's your brother. That's your sister. And I'm ashamed of this country at this point in our life. We act like we're afraid of people who are different. These are God's children. Some of them are trying to escape horrific conditions, and we treat them like stone. Of course we can't let everybody in, but we can sure remember that the way we treat these people is the way we treat the Christ. He said, inasmuch as you've done it unto one of the least of these, you've done it unto me. Christians don't live by fear. We live by faith and hope. And we believe that the meanest, most base person can be redeemed, can be reclaimed. So we love our neighbor. And then Jesus said, as you love yourself. I've had a struggle with this one for a long time in my life. I've come to know that unless I love myself, I really can't love other people. And sometimes my dislike of other people is really a dislike of myself. And I project on them my failure and my sin. surely I am a child of God. I used to hear preachers talk about their call to ministry. Most of them were in the cornfield. That used to tickle me. And I wonder if they were called into ministry or called out of the cornfield, you know. And it was always dramatic. They had spent years denying God's call and running from God. Finally, they said yes. Well, that wasn't my experience. I just grew up with the call. My dad was a wonderful minister, a great preacher, a wonderful pastor. And I thought there must be something wrong with me because I hadn't been in the cornfield and wrestled and said no and struggled and so forth. And I finally realized God calls different ways. And I used to wonder about my Christian experience. It hadn't been dramatic and out of the blue. And, you know, I just grew up in the faith. Now, Billy Graham said that because you were born in a garage doesn't make you a car. And just because we're born in a church doesn't make us a Christian. But we can ease into the faith, can't we? We can grow in our understanding. And we can say yes. I don't have to have your experience. You have to have my experience. All we need is to know that God loves us, that we're special in God's sight. I was in a sensitivity group years ago. That was before sensitivity groups went off the rails and got to be touchy-feely and so forth. There were about 22 of us in this group, led by a wonderful man who had a knack for getting you to expose your soul in a short order. In this group was one of the most beautiful women I have ever seen. I mean, she was gorgeous. And in the middle of our discussion, she just suddenly blurted out, "I am sick and tired of being so fat and ugly." And I laughed out loud. Fat and ugly? I wish everybody was fat and ugly. But then I realized she was not kidding. There was real pain in her voice. And as her story unfolded, her parents loved her, I'm sure. But they were high expectation parents. And if she won second prize in a beauty pageant, it should have been first. If she made an A, it should have been an A plus. No matter what she did, it should always have been something better. So she grew to see herself as fat and ugly. And I wonder how many of us are like that as Christians. We sing about being worms in the dust. We know that we're unworthy sinners. But my goodness, we are so worthy that God sent His Son to reclaim our life, to die for our sins. And while without Christ we may be zip, with Christ we are children of the King. I mean, stand on your tiptoes. You are somebody. You are royal. You are a child of the King. Several years ago, I used to watch a young preacher on television. And I confess I didn't watch him for inspiration. I watched him to laugh. If you closed your eyes, you could swear you were listening to Billy Graham. He had him down to a T. He had his language, he had his emphasis. And if you didn't look at him, you would just know you were listening to the wonderful Billy Graham. But coming from this little peewee of a fellow, I just laughed. And God forgive me. But he was a joke because he was trying to be somebody he was not. He was trying to be somebody he was not called to be. And we need to stop trying to be like somebody else and affirm the person that God created. not necessarily what you would like for your life. So, I've still got my failures. I had to watch that video today. But I'm beloved of God. I was called of God. I've been equipped by God. And I am sustained by God. And with all my failures, I'm a child of God. So are you. So are you. Well, Lord, what's most important? Love God. Love your neighbor. Love yourself. Would you bow with me for a moment? In your own way, remember now who God is. Whatever name is special to you, Shepherd, Father, Lord. And just simply say in your own way, dear Lord, I do love you. I do want to love you more. I do want to love you more than anything or anyone else. Oh God, you've loved me with an everlasting love. Let me love in return. And think about your neighbor. Not just the one that loves you and blesses you, but the one that irritates you, antagonizes you, even hurts you. You don't know who they are, what's eating them, but you do know they need God. They need you. Maybe your love can awaken something in them. Maybe your care can be a bridge to a new life. Finally, think of yourself. Some of us aren't really where we meant to be at this point in life. We're ashamed of some of what we've done and who we are. But remember whose you are. Ask God to help you love yourself, to affirm yourself, not because you're good, but because you're God's. God loves you, so you love yourself. I sense tonight the presence of the living God. I hope you do. And I assume that some of you have heard God speaking to you in a personal way. And I don't know how to tell you to respond to that. But as we sing our closing hymn, I hope you'll just respond some way to what's welling up within you. Some of you may want to come and just say, Lord, thank you, I love you, and I want to love you better. Help me with my neighbor. Help me with myself. Or may just want to remain seated and continue to pray. Or you may want the words of the hymn to guide your thinking. We don't want to leave here tonight without remembering who we are, who God is, and what God may do in our life. So let us sing prayerfully.